Jazzcast Pros.
Welcome to the Healthy Illness Podcast. I am your host, Kelly Marie, and Healthy Illness is all about learning how to build healthier relationships while living with mental health conditions. This episode, well, first of all, we're in a season all about motion, and I have been talking about this guest since the beginning of the season. Yes, it has finally arrived. Our guest today is Mary Beth Scott. Mary Beth Scott is the Onward Run Coach. We go back many years, and we'll dive into that in our conversation today. But Mary Beth is a runner. She is a run coach. She believes in movement, and we reconnected on Instagram, just both of us following each other's stories. And she had gone through some injuries and was talking about her recovery process. And it really spoke to me about what it's like to live this life of healing, of recovery, of persistence, of even asking for help, of learning when to sit down. And so we talk about that today. Mary Beth is a certified run coach. The name of her business, Onward. Onward is the motivation behind everything that she does, from running to mothering to coaching. Success is rarely linear, right? Like there's this highs and lows. And for her, the only way to move forward is to press onward. Mary Beth, I am so excited that we finally get to do this. Let's dive in. Your journey speaks to me in that I'm not going to go out and start running. And I mean, who knows what tomorrow brings, but I don't see myself as a runner. But I know there's some kind of satisfaction I see in you when you post about running.
Yeah. And I think it's like all tied into like what kind of movement gives you the most kind of satisfaction, right? Like, you know, I talk to people a lot who are like, I'm not a runner. I hate running. I never want to run. And I'm like, that's fine. Like you do not have to run in order to get the benefits of feeling good about moving your body, right? Like I look at it as like, what's accessible to you that's going to make you the happiest. For some people, yeah, it's running. Some people, you have a safe neighborhood and you have access to, plenty, the time, or you're willing to make the time or move things around. But not everybody has that. Not everybody has, a body that is happy about running and the pounding, or, but maybe for somebody else, it's, walking. Like I just get out the door and I experience the world around me, right? Or maybe for somebody, it's, the other day I was over at Delaware Park and I saw somebody rollerblading and I was like, oh my God, I used to love rollerblade. I actually got a pair of rollerblades for my high school graduation present and I loved it. Like I know that was the 90s, right? Like that was right there. But, whatever movement kind of brings you the most, it's so cliche to say brings you the most joy, but truly like what makes you feel alive and happy and safe and fulfilled. And again, like I was saying, you have to go back to like, what do you have access to? Not everybody can walk out their door and like have a safe place to go. I mean, let's face it, as women and like female presenting people, we're already at a disadvantage because
right.
we're, so that's something to take into consideration. Not everybody has access to a gym. Not everybody has access to, a bike, right? Like biking can be wildly expensive and, time consuming. Yeah. But whatever you find that makes you feel like connected to yourself, even connected to other people, right? If you find like a workout partner or a walking buddy or, something that just makes your insides feel good, right? And gives you a sense of satisfaction when you're done. That's like kind of the whole point. And it's worth playing around with different things, right? Like it's worth being a beginner in anything. Like as adults, we're never really given the opportunity to be a beginner at anything anymore, right? Like we're,
That's true.
Especially like if you're a parent or like if you're in a job where you have a leadership position, right? You're supposed to be good at everything. You're supposed to know how to do all this stuff. And we don't really give ourselves a lot of grace to be new at something and to be bad at something and to like figure things out. So it's worth exploring that and kind of being like, that looks like a cool thing that I've always wanted to try. Like I've always wanted to try playing tennis, or I've always wanted to try, I don't know, going to a rock climbing gym or something that like, why not, right? Like what's the harm in giving it a try? You might find something that you absolutely despise. You might be like, I will never do that again. This was a terrible mistake. But you might find something that you're like, you know what, I was not good at that, but it was pretty fun, so I want to try it again. Like for me, that thing would be swimming, right? Like I was just thinking today, I'm not a strong swimmer at all. I can keep myself afloat, but that's about it. I think the thing that's been holding me up from taking swim lessons as an adult is like that vulnerability and being like, "Hi, I'm terrible at this. Can you please teach me how to do this?" Right? Like I'm a grown woman and I'm not a good swimmer. So like kind of being honest about that and just playing around with it. The last thing that I will say in this particular vein is like it should be fun, right? Like there's so many things that we do in our lives that are just a drag. They're just not enjoyable that you have to do, right? Like you have to go to work, you have to pay bills, you have to put gas in your like all of those things like right? You have to talk to people that you don't like and that are like like there's a million of those, right? So whether it's running, whether it's anything else, it should be something that makes you feel like you're playing, like you're like it's joyful, right? So and that again, that takes a little time to figure out.
So, how long have you been running? And I love that you mentioned swimming because that's on my list of I want to go take swimming lessons. And now that my legs they're just weird. They walk, they work, so they're fine.
Yeah.
But the one is not as strong as the other, and so in my mind, I'm like, maybe swimming is not something I should do. I'm cleared to medically do whatever it is I want.
Sure.
But I still have this fear of I couldn't really swim well before.
Yeah.
It's going to be even worse if I try
Right.
now. But this space of grace is one of those. I don't know if you ever have those moments where you're talking to somebody and they tell you the thing you would tell yourself or you would tell someone else and it's the thing you needed to hear for yourself. So I needed to hear that from me because I tell myself this all the time, but it clearly hasn't really resonated in this space because I haven't looked into swimming lessons. I know a couple places to call, but I haven't done it because I'm like, should I be doing this? Of course, Kelly, do the thing. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll try and take my own advice too, because like, I'm just thinking like the reason I was even thinking about doing it is because the past couple of years I've been dealing with personally like some injuries for running. And I tell my son this too, he's a baseball player, right? And he is very much like me for good or for bad, but he gets if he has a bad game or whatever, he gets really kind of worked up and kind of down on himself. And it's hard when that is like your only outlet, right? So you have to sometimes make other paths to that happiness. And if your body physically is unable to do the thing that you love to do, your options are sit and be mad about it or make a way out of no way, right? Like find a different way. Which again, for me, I was like, well, maybe I could go take some swim lessons, and I haven't quite made that work yet. So we're getting there. We're getting there.
I'm going to revisit the list of things because that's definitely one. So swimming, running. Oh, so where did running come from? Where did it start? Why is that your jam? Is it just a default space? Did you find it to get there? Like, what was that?
Yeah, no. So I actually started running. So my dad was a runner when I was growing up, and his friends were runners, and that was a different time, right? Like the 70s and 80s, people were nuts then. So really, I mean, they just were hardcore. So I started running in high school I ran cross country. I didn't really take it too seriously. I feel like such was the nature of certain sports in high school where it was kind of like, yeah, whatever, there wasn't a whole lot of, for good or for bad, there wasn't a whole lot of pressure you gotta be the best, it was just kind of like, yeah, let's go do this one. Okay. And then I went to college and I did not run. I did the opposite of running. And then when I moved back home after college, I would run here and there. When I got my first teaching job, like my first career teaching job, a friend of mine that I taught with was like, hey, we're going to do the corporate challenge. Do you want to be on the team? And I was like, or you should come do it. There was no team. It was just come do it? And I was like, well, sure. If I'm going to do it, I want to run it. So, I started practicing and going out for a little run. Then I ran it and did, well for myself, better than I thought I was going to do. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is great. And so ever since then, I really I got into running races as an adult, and then I did longer races. I met my husband through running.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we met right before the turkey trot one year. I said to him, if I see you at the turkey trot, I'll give you my phone number. And lo and behold, we found each other. And then 2 years later, we got married. Like
Wow.
we got married on Thanksgiving weekend 2 years later. So it was like a, just like a thing. And then, I had my kids. I ran while I was pregnant. I ran with them in the stroller. I did a few marathons, a bunch of half marathons. I still liked, road racing. I worked with a couple coaches, learned some things, the things that, I have my teaching degree, and, I wasn't working after I had the kids, and it got to be about the time where I was like, I should really think about going back to work, but I didn't want to go to teaching. And I got my coaching certification eventually. And then I started also coaching high school cross country. So it's just kind of like a lot, right? Like there's a lot of different, I've met most of my like great friends as an adult through running. Anytime I travel, I always make sure I have time to go for a run just so I can kind of scope out where I am. Like this past weekend, I was up in Kingston, Ontario for baseball. And, I went for a little run and kind of checked out the town. And it's just like it's a nice way to, I don't know, you can do it on your own 2 feet, right? And you can do it you can kind of do it wherever, as like I said, as long as you have somewhere that's like safe and, relatively open and accessible. So yeah, I've just kind of like worked it into every kind of part of my life.
It's become a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not exercise for you. It's just a
Yeah.
part of you.
It's like bigger than like, I'm going to go for a run because I need to work off these tacos I had last night. Or like that is a reason that people run, right? But like mine is more like it's all encompassing, which is good and bad, right? So like having an injury, if your running is like part of multiple parts of your identity, it's kind of like, oh, well, now what do I do? Right. So, like I said, I'd been injured for the past couple of years, kind of off and on. And, I had to really kind of separate my own running from like the people I coach and not be like, oh, wow, like, must be nice to be able to go run. Like I had to really be a big girl about it and say, I'm injured, but I can still draw on my experiences and I can still, work with you and encourage you. And that's what I love about running too, is like there's a really, for the most part, big supportive community. I mean, wherever you go, you can find people running anywhere, right? You can find a race anywhere. So like I said, I met a lot of my friends as an adult through running. So it's nice to have that in common too.
So when you just want to go back a little bit in the recovery process and working through injuries and getting back into the place of being able to run or not, did you have to find other things to do instead of running? Like, did you still need to move? Did you still need to do things?
Yeah, so that's interesting. That's a good question because I feel like I'm going to generalize here with most runners, right? Like we don't want to really do anything outside of running because it is kind of so much more than just like going on the elliptical or whatever. So yeah, so I was pretty stubborn for a while. I kept being like, it's going to get better and I'm going to da da da. And I would do other things and I could feel my kind of my overall well-being kind of slide a little bit because not only was I not running, which was frustrating, I wasn't doing anything. I had no, well, it's not, I wasn't doing nothing, but like I wasn't doing that, like, get your heart rate up kind of exercise or movement. And then it just kind of became a habit, right? Like then I was like, well, if I can't run, I was very stubborn. I'm just going to do my little strength work and that's going to be fine. And it just kind of it can put you in a bit of a hole, right? Because then once you are ready to do it, you just have to kind of shift your mindset back a little bit. Like when you're injured and then you're cleared to run and you're okay, your brain kind of goes right to this place where it's like, well, I'm just going to go right back to where I was and start on, pick it up where I left off. And that is unwise and also kind of impossible, right? Because your
Yeah.
body has not been doing the thing for a while, and your muscles and your cardiovascular system is like, hold on a minute. Now, wait just a minute. We're not quite ready for this. So, personally, I dug myself into a little bit of a hole. Do I recommend that? Absolutely not. Again, like you were saying, what would you tell a friend, right? Like, what would I tell one of my athletes? I would tell them to cross train. I would tell them to pick something that it's not going to be running. It's not going to give you the same love and joy and happiness that running does, but it's something. It's better than nothing. Once I started doing those other things, I was kind of a baby about it. I was like, I don't like this. I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm just going to do it because I know it's good for me. It's like taking my vitamins. And then I started to feel like good about it. I started feeling happy about it and like came to kind of look forward to doing some of those other things. And then it did make the transition back to running feel a little bit better.
And so as I'm sitting in my house sweating because we don't have AC here,
Yes, it's quite hot.
what do you do when it's 90 degrees outside? Are
Oh,
you?
that's such a good question too, right? Because yes, you're right. Getting outside in the weather like this is like, not only is it like mentally and like it just feels awful, like it's actually pretty dangerous. And,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're like really well conditioned and, you got to be really careful. So, what I tell my athletes is you're going to have to slow down. You're going to have to kind of prepare ahead of time, maybe like pre-hydrate, right? Like make sure you're taking in hydration throughout the day before. Understand the way the heat affects your body and the humidity is truly, it's not just in your head. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
need to adjust things. You need to either slow your pace down or you need to go for a shorter amount of time. A lot of times, if you go, adjust your schedule, if you go early in the morning before the sun comes up, it can still be pretty humid regardless if the sun is up or not. But a lot of times, earlier in the morning feels a little bit better because it's a little
Mm-hmm.
cooler. At night can also be okay, after the sun goes down. But I do find the streets can still be hot, right? Like the
Mm.
pavement from being in
Yep.
the sun. So like that radiant heat coming off the ground just is like, whew, it's just tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like it's really a little bit more thought you have to put into it and preparation. And sometimes, maybe you have to move your run if you have access to a gym or if you have a treadmill and the air conditioning, maybe you go do that. Or maybe you do something different, as same thing as if you were injured. Maybe it makes more sense for you to go do some aqua jogging at the gym if you have access to that, or maybe you go and instead of going for a run, you take an easy walk, right? You make sure you stay in the shade. And then afterwards too, right? You want to really hydrate afterwards. You want
Mm-hmm.
to take in electrolytes. You want to, maybe put a cold towel around your neck after you're done, or just bringing your body temperature down. Again, it's just thinking about these things ahead of time as opposed to just, popping out the door, going for a run, and coming back and getting in the shower. That doesn't always, like this morning I went for a run. I tried to go early, but it was absolutely pouring rain. And then as soon as the rain stopped, like 3 minutes later, the sun came back out and it was immediately like
It was
just it
oppressive.
was so hot. It was so humid.
Yeah.
So I went for a run. I cut my run a little bit shorter and then I had to go right to an appointment after I had like just a tiny bit of time. So I jumped in the shower. And it was one of those days where after you shower, you're still sweating, right? Like you're just
Yeah.
sweating and sweating. And I'm like, well, this is what you have to do, right? Like
Yes.
you got to figure out a way to exist in the world as a sweaty person. And it's okay, right?
It's a lot. And I wonder if, I mean, I know our bodies adjust to the climate that we're in, but I don't know how people live in this kind of weather every day
I,
and still do like outdoor activities. Like
I
I
don't
just.
know. I mean, there is like heat acclimation, right? Like, so I always tell my athletes, like, the first several weeks of the summer, are rough. You have to be real gentle with yourself and your expectations because it does take time. And eventually your body does adjust to, the heat. It's still not amazing. I mean, some people love it. Some people are like, "Oh my God, this is my favorite weather," and I'm like, "Okay, how nice for you," but no, thank you, not me. But yeah, you do eventually adjust, and it's the same thing in the winter, right? Like our winters are brutal, and I find it's a little easier to go from too hot to too cold, but it is again an adjustment. Like there's different things that you can do in the winter to make that run feel a little better. Maybe you warm up before you go outside, maybe instead of doing your warm up outside, or make sure you dress in layers or whatever. But yeah, definitely you do adjust, and then you hit this, all of a sudden one day you're like, oh, that didn't feel as terrible. And it's a gradual thing. Like you cannot force it. You cannot just like will yourself into feeling great on a run on a day like today. But it is like a little mental, trick to just keep telling yourself this is all a step on the path. Eventually it's going to feel a little bit better. Eventually it's going to be okay. Like in the winter, if we ever go away and we go like to somewhere warm, and I'll go for a run like in February, right? So we've been in winter for a good long time. I always say that my blood, it's like, it feels like glue, right? Like I still have that like thick winter blood, right? Like your body is still just like trying to keep yourself warm, and then you go somewhere hot and you try and run, and it's like, oh, what? Like it's someone just threw you into the frying pan. It's so hot, and your body just doesn't know what to do with itself. The hard stuff it's just hard right now. It's not going to be hard forever. You got to go through the hard stuff to get to the easier stuff, which is another reason why I love running, because I do feel like it has taught me so many things about being patient and staying in things that are awful, and not, I don't mean like staying in like a bad relationship. I mean like in a hard situation, like it's hard right
Working
now.
through it.
Yeah,
And
it's not going to be hard forever. And how am I going to get myself from this really hard part to a part that feels a little bit better? And a lot of that is just working on your mental fortitude and your mental strategies. And maybe it's like you have a phrase that you repeat to yourself for 10 minutes at a time, or maybe it's I hate to say disassociating, but like maybe you put yourself in a different spot, right? And
yes.
you picture something else, or maybe for some people it's really helpful to think about that end result. And like, people say, what's your why, right? Like thinking about, what am I doing this for in the first place? And what do I want to feel like at the end of that? And I know that experiencing this uncomfortable part right now is going to get me to that part, and that's going to be worth it. So, finding different ways to get through the bad stuff or the tough stuff.
That's good. Inclines are bad for me on the bike, although I haven't. So we're talking a year and a half ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I haven't been on the
still
bike
in
on
there.
an incline. Yeah. And I become the little engine that could.
I love it.
And we'll repeat, I think I can, and we'll count if like there's the Ohio Street Bridge going to Outer Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
So riding that, I would count the cement blocks. It wasn't about getting over the bridge. It was, I'm only getting from this cement square to the next one, to the next one. And it's the little engine that could, because that's the only way, that or get off the bike, which I'm not opposed to doing either. I will walk the bike up.
Right. There are
shame.
There are definitely times where it's worth it in your best interest to get off the bike or to walk it in, or again, doing these things for a long enough time gives you the wisdom and the discernment to be like, oh, this is a time when I should really stop. I just am tired. I just am getting bored. I'm getting annoyed. Like what, like you can name the feeling you're feeling. It's not, I'm not hurt. My heart rate isn't out of my chest. Like it's just, I don't want to do this right now. And like, you got to figure out a way to, sometimes it's, I'm not going to do this right now. And sometimes it's, I just don't want to do it, but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna get through it. So I like the idea of counting the blocks. I do that sometimes on the treadmill. I like count out the beats in the music. I do like 8,000 counts to 8. Like I'll be like 1, 2, 3. I don't even know how many times I've counted to 8, but I just know that like getting the 4 count, it just makes me, eventually I'm going to get to the end of the song. Eventually I'm going to get to the end of the thing. And it's like any little thing that you can grab onto And you never know what that thing is going to be. Maybe it's counting the blocks. Maybe it's like a mantra. Maybe it's, oh, I see a blue jay flying from that tree to that tree. How far can I follow with my eyes? Like, you never know what little trick is going to keep you in it. And then all of a sudden you're done and you're like, oh, I did it. And that's the good stuff. That's where you're like, oh, that was really, really, really hard. I did not want to do it. And I did do it, and now I'm done. And so I know the next time I go to do it, it's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to, a lot of the times this comes from like fear, right? Like, I'm afraid of feeling bad. I'm afraid of not being good at this. I'm afraid of what if I can't do it? And just working through the fear of that and realizing, like, a lot of times those fears are not necessarily irrational, but the bad stuff that you think is going to happen isn't actually going to happen. And I mean, can bad things happen? Of course, right? Of course. But training yourself to believe, like, this is hard, and also I can still do this, right? Like, what if I fail? Okay, what if?
What if?
Oh, sure. Great.
Right.
Then what? What's going to happen next? I say that to one of my sons all the time. Like, he tends to, what if this happened? Okay, well, and then what? And then what happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, finding a way to kind of get right up to the edge of that thing that you're afraid of doing, and then looking past it and being like, well, okay, yeah, if I can't do it, is my family still going to love me? Am I still going to, be a good person? Yeah. Right. Okay, well then, sure. Then let's give it a try.
Right. What are the important takeaways?
Yeah.
What still stands? What still is true? What still is good in all of the things, even with the bad, even with the possibilities and the what ifs and the because the brain loves to focus on those what ifs.
Yeah, because they're like easy to kind of like, they're an easy distraction, right? Like when you're working through something that's hard, it's easy to kind of jump on kind of catastrophize and distract yourself from, well, what happens if it does work? What happens if I do a good job? What happens if I do get through that, right? Then what? And then I'm good at something? Oh no. I don't know. A lot of that comes from like this lack of self-belief. I'm not good at that. I'm not a runner. I'm not a cyclist. I'm not a swimmer. I don't know how to do those things. Okay, well, what if you do?
Right.
Yeah, and the phrase that is like disgusting, but also helps me so much, and I use it with my kids. I use it with my athletes. I use it with my cross country runners. Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Like, you have this big, enormous thing. Maybe you're training for a marathon. Maybe you are, an adult going back to school to get a degree. Maybe you have a big thing in front of you and it seems so overwhelming. How am I going to do this? I was just with my son the other day. He was pitching, and he was, being a mom, watching your kid pitch in a baseball game is like one of the most stressful things I've ever gone through. It's because it's just them, right? It's just, especially like if you get yourself into a hole, like all you can think of is what's next. One thing. What's the next thing? Where it's like getting up over a hill on a bike. What's the next block? What's the next block? And then eventually you're at the end.
I love it. So how can people find you?
Well, my company is called Onward Run Coaching. And then my website is onwardrun.com. I'm on Instagram at onward_run coach.
Yep, onward_run coach.
Nice. Okay, yeah. So you can find me there.
You got it.
I'll be on Instagram. Yeah, and I work with all kinds of people. I work with people who are training for marathons. I work with people who are just getting back into running or perhaps starting running for the first time. I have a lot of people contact me who are like, I really would like to be a runner. So I have people who do run walk, like return to running, beginning running. I have people who are training to break 3 hours in a marathon. So like I've got the whole range of, and it's really fun because like everybody, regardless of their, I don't want to say ability, but their running like experience, they all love it, right? They all love what they're doing. They love it so much that they want to contact me to get better at it and to find a way to, make it fit into their life and to, I work with a lot of people who, they have kids and they have a busy life and they have really kind of demanding jobs, or they've been running forever and they just want to, keep run, like a lot of masters runners. So there's all kinds of, I see it as my job. I kind of call myself like a running concierge, right? Like I see it as my job to kind of take a look at their life, zoom out and see where we can fit things in, right? Like maybe they struggle with either accountability or, I can't seem to find the time. Well, I kind of take a step back and look at all of the pieces and try and rearrange them and help kind of make sense of things. And I like to say I like to fit running into their lives rather than giving them the training and make them fit their lives into this training plan. Everybody's busy. Nobody is just like sitting around waiting for something to do, right? Everybody's got making time for X, Y, and Z. So I see my job as like making it easier to do the things that you like to do. The important thing to me about being a coach is like building the relationship with people and letting them know that, no matter what, I'm on their team. And I tell people who in our like initial conversations, like your friends care about you and your family cares about you and they want you to do the things that make you happy. But like ultimately, they don't really care how fast you ran a mile. They don't really care that a workout you did 4 weeks ago, you did it today and it felt so much better and you ran every repeat 10 seconds faster. Like they'll be happy for you. But like as a runner, that's like super exciting. And like I, as your coach, am also super excited for you. Like I just kind of see myself as an extension of your running toolbox. I'm your hype woman, I would say. I'm just as excited about your running successes as you are.
So I have two sets of takeaways. The takeaways for the personal story is give yourself grace to try something new. And when the weather is wild, whether actual weather or life weather, slow down and stay hydrated.
Oh, yes. I love that.
And then for running takeaways outside of contacting a run coach, Onward Run Coach, recognizing the fear. I thought that was really important to me. So maybe important to someone else, but recognizing that the fear exists and it's not likely to happen, but what if it does, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and what, and then, mm-hmm. and what happens after that? It doesn't change who you are as a person. It doesn't change how people love you or how you love others. You are still you. And then fit running into your life versus fitting your life into running, which I think we don't do when we pick up something new or add something, whether it's a job or a hobby or what, we try mm-hmm. and contort our lives to fit this thing. Yeah. When the thing actually should be, I don't say a natural fit into our lives, but it kind of fills the gaps in the spaces, right? Yes. It should be a natural fit. I don't know another way to say that.
It should be something that is like, not only like physically enjoyable, it should be emotionally enjoyable. It should be not something that you dread. That's like another, you shouldn't see it as like one more commitment, right? It should be something that makes you, it rejuvenates you, right? It gives you energy to do all of the other commitments that you don't have any control over. You have to kind of do those things when they're supposed to be done. I mean, if your kids have piano lesson, they have to be there at a certain time. So you don't have a choice but to get them there at that time. If your kids, they have to be to school at a certain time, you have to be to work at a certain time. Like those are things that are non-negotiable. So you want the thing that you're adding in to feel like a break in the must do's, right? You want it to feel like, oh, look at me, I get to do this. I'm so lucky. I get to go take 30 minutes for myself, 40 minutes for myself. I just thought of something that I always tell my athletes when I give them like a hard workout or they have a race that they're on, everybody gets nervous before a race, regardless of how well you're prepared. Or I tell them to just go be curious. Be curious about what you can do. Give yourself a chance. Maybe it works out great. Maybe it feels terrible, but just go be curious. What can you learn from this? What can you take away? Maybe you learn that you despise that race that you signed up for and you are never going to do it again, right? Or maybe you learn I'm tougher than I thought I was. And I really wanted to give up and I didn't. And like, that's pretty cool. How do I make that happen again? Right. Like, it just don't approach it in the mindset of like, this is going to be so hard. How am I going to do it? Because that is like an easy default. Go into it with what happens when it feels bad? What's my brain going to do when this is getting really hard and I want to quit, but then I don't? What happens if I don't quit? What happens if I just keep running? What happens if I slow down? What happens if I surge? Whatever. Be curious.
I love it. I'm going to go be curious and probably unpack some more boxes, but
I think that's you never know what you're going to find in there. What could be in there?
And I'm still looking for things that I should have found by now.
Yeah, moving is a tough. The moving's tough. It's in
been
many different ways. Yeah.
I feel like everything should be unpacked and it's not. And I
Don't
just pulled up
give
the
yourself
rug
a
that we
should.
put down. I know, shit all over yourself. So no shitting.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's easier said than done, though. I don't mean to be like, don't should, but like.
At least for me, when I'm talking to people that get it, that accountability and thought process for me is necessary. Because, I mean, I don't want somebody co-signing things that don't need to be. I mean, like, don't co-sign that shit. Like,
right.
No, don't should. We don't should.
Right. Don't should. Just
because it's not helpful.
Right. And
either
like,
put it up or put it down, or whatever the case may be.
What happens if it takes another month to unpack? Like, then what? Right.
Then what? I'm still living here, still paying the bills.
If you need to find that spatula, you will find that spatula. You will make it a point to find the thing, right?
Or buy another one, and then they'll have two. Then I can gift one when I find the other.
Then somebody else gets a nice spatula.
Yes. Worst case scenario, someone gets a spatula.
Exactly.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking time to.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. This was so nice.
I love it. Mary Beth Scott, Onward Run Coach, City Honors Class of.
Yeah, never mind. Centaurs through and through. We'll just leave it at that.
Oh my gosh, how interesting life has been, and just the full circle of all the things, and just the connections, and who knew?
I know.
Decades later. That. Here we be.
Here we are. We'll hug at the reunion.
Yes, I'm here for it.
Hugs. Yeah, me too.
Mary Beth, grace to try something new. That is my personal overall takeaway. I'm going to continue to give myself grace. And in that space of, I like this thing, but I'm not great at it yet, and I need to stick to it. Like, grace to stay in that space of becoming proficient, of becoming good at a thing outside of that initial, ooh, I like this. So grace to try something new, both in my personal and professional life, is what I'm going to move forward with. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to see you. Still surprised we have not run into each other in this big town of Buffalo, but until the next time, I want you to come back so we can do this again. I enjoyed our conversation, even what we didn't record. It just was really helpful for me. And I think people would really love to also hear those conversations. So let's do this again. If you are struggling, if you need someone to talk to, listen, you can dial 988. Someone is there 24 hours a day, judgment free, to walk you through this moment in time. Right? Dial 988 on your phone. You can also text, and someone is there 24 hours a day, judgment free, to answer your call and to walk with you through this moment in time. If you're looking for resources, 211, you can dial 211 on your phone or go to 211 in your web browser to be able to find resources in your area. Everything is either zip code or city, town, searchable. And so whether you're looking for mental health resources or physical health resources, respite, assistance for friends and family, like 211 is a great place to start. This is the end of our season of movement. And next week, I want to update you on the thought processes of Kelly Marie, but really what this mental health journey has been like lately, the takeaways, like grace to try something new, and where we're going next. Until the next time, Be the light, like, subscribe, and share. Let someone know that you're listening to the Healthy Illness Podcast. Let me know you're listening to the Healthy Illness Podcast. Big shout out to Jazz, the Jazzcast Pros Podcast Network, and all of the other hosts on the network. Y'all keep doing what you're doing and be the light too.